Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Emily Molina. I'm a professor at Brooklyn College. And what we're going to be doing today is, well, first of all, it's so nice to see you all. I'm feeling very nostalgic about last year's Open Data Week and really missing being in a room with all of you. So it's really nice to see everyone. We're here to see a sustainability themed tour of Greenpoint that 4 of our fantastic urban sustainability students at Brooklyn College put together. And just before we jump in, I'd like to introduce our panel. And please feel free to jump in if you want to say, if I miss anything or want to add anything. Jimmie Costello is the first on my list. Jimmie, do you want to give a wave? Jimmie
Yes.
Costello is a proud Brooklyn College alum, class of 2020, and is particularly passionate about sustainability in relation to waste, design, community, and class. Adam Guzman, hi Adam, is a first-generation graduate of Brooklyn College. He also graduated last year in 2020 with Jimmie, and his interests include urban natural areas management, stewardship of public lands, and conservation of both urban forests and urban wetlands. And then we have Lisa Bloodgood. Hi, Lisa. Lisa is a North Brooklyn resident since 2006, and she's currently the Director of Advocacy and Education with Newtown Creek Alliance and is board co-chair for North Brooklyn Neighbors. She's also involved in the community advisory group for the Newtown Creek Superfund process, and she serves on the stakeholder advisory board for Mount Sinai's Community Engagement Corps and the Harbor Estuary Program's Citizen Advisory Council. Her work is rooted in transforming priorities and economies into those that center human and ecological health and well-being at their core. And I'm Emily Molina, like I said. I'm an associate professor of sociology at Brooklyn College, and I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Brooklyn at Brooklyn College, which is kind of an interdisciplinary research hub that's focused on critical and cultural issues in Brooklyn. At Brooklyn College, I teach primarily in the sociology and the urban sustainability programs, and I mostly teach quantitative methods, which is why I am an open data evangelist. So what we're going to do, just to give you a little sense of the flow for today, Jimmie and Adam are going to present their PodWalk, but I'm just going to frame it very quickly for you. And then we thought we'd start with the virtual tour and then talk a little bit about the advantages of using open data in the classroom, but particularly in partnership with community groups. So just to frame this PodWalk for you that Jimmie and Adam are going to take us through, sorry for my kid in the background. The idea was to bring together students' academic research with available open data and to integrate a community organization's perspective. So the students research and spend time in neighborhoods or particular places, and then they put together kind of a multimedia tour for the public that helps them bring together what they've learned about what sustainability and resilience really mean in very hyper-local contexts. And this is a project that is the kind of capstone project for urban sustainability students at Brooklyn College. So that's a little frame. I'm gonna hand it over to Jimmie and Adam, and then afterwards I can give a little bit more context about the assignment and how it's useful. And also I'm hoping to open up the conversation to all things open data related to education and community work. So I'll hand it over to Jimmie and Adam.
Don't have too much to say. I think I'll just kind of let it speak for itself. So I'll just share the screen, other than I think we have much to say about it. Actually, Brenda, I'll need you to give me the screen sharing ability. Thanks.
And while that transition is taking place, I just want to jump in and say when Brooklyn College students approached me and said, could we talk to you, Newtown Creek Alliance, about this PodWalk we're putting together? Of course, it's really intriguing. Our mission as an organization is to reveal, restore, and revitalize Newtown Creek. And so the reveal element of our mission, it just obviously rang a bell for me and said, yeah, this is a great way for us to kind of work towards our mission, furthering those goals and integrating, this community that not only is interested in data, but also interested in certain specific elements of the neighborhood that we're interested in. And so, that dynamic was really, really exciting for me and for our organization. So just a little bit of like kind of my perspective and our organization's perspective on how this was going to kind of come together and what it might look like.
Can I jump in very quickly, Jimmie, before you get started also, because this is reminding me. So Jimmie and Adam are presenting this, but it was a group of 4 students last spring who put this together. And so I just want to acknowledge Malak Ali and Kiara Rivas couldn't be here, but they were part of putting this together as well.
Okay, so this is a preface. I'm not going to read through it for you, but essentially it's just a reminder of what it is. And this is designed to be like walked through in real life, so you can do it. And we have all the directions that you'll see throughout the map. So, and then this is a preview. So this is where you would start, and this is Greenpoint. Down here is Williamsburg, and then over here you get into like Maspeth and Queen. And it has 10 stops, and we'll go through all of them now.
The first stop of your tour
Perfect.
is the NuHart Superfund site. Underneath this former plastics manufacturer sit 2 large plumes of toxins, which in recent years has been designated as a Class 2 Superfund site by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The plumes are a result of underground storage tanks that leak toxins into the surrounding soil and groundwater from 1950 until the site's closure in 2004. Toxins such as phthalates and trichloroethylene were cited as comprising the majority of the plumes and potentially being the most harmful to human health. Trichloroethylene is a known carcinogen, while phthalates have been linked to disruptions in the reproductive health of both men and women. While the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is handling the lengthy remediation of the site, a community-based organization known as North Brooklyn Neighbors has been tasked with encouraging close involvement of local residents in the planning and execution of remediation projects taking place within the Greenpoint area. A task stemming from the Technical Assistant Grant awarded to North Brooklyn Neighbors via the Department of Environmental Conservation. North Brooklyn Neighbors, alongside City Council member Stephanie Levin, have advocated to relocate the proposed siting of a K-8 public school directly across from NuHart. As of 2019, the New York City Department.
So this is our first stop, NuHart Superfund site. And then the second one is 5 Blue Slip. So there's directions for us if you were to move through. And then we have the audio.
Owned by the Greenpoint Landing Development Company, which transforms industrial areas into new residential buildings, 5 Blue Slip is one of the affordable housing options in Greenpoint. This entire building is dedicated to affordable housing while offering a laundry room, bicycle room, a fitness room, and a rooftop courtyard with views of the Manhattan skyline. Potential tenants can apply to the housing lottery for this building, from which tenants are chosen at random. An applicant must have a certain income in order to apply for this lottery. For one person to apply for a studio, their income must be between $14,000 and $38,000. For a 4-person household to apply for a 2-bedroom, total household income must be between $18,000 and $54,000. Rent prices commensurate with applicant income, but all are surprisingly affordable, especially for new development. Prices range from $368 for a studio to $1,070 for a 2-bedroom, with the average price being $830. Half of the apartments are reserved for applicants who already live in Greenpoint or adjacent Brooklyn neighborhood. 5 Blue Slip is an outstanding example of modern affordable housing in Greenpoint.
The Greenpoint Manufacturing and Design Center was originally a factory, spinning rope and fabric for clients including the U.S. Navy. From colonial times through the 1950s, urban areas such as Greenpoint were powerful industrial spaces, producing the goods and materials needed for an advancing society. In New York and countless other cities in the U.S., the period of white flight during the 1950s and 60s saw these profitable industries leaving urban centers for newly developed suburbs, along with their more affluent business people. This building was repurposed in 1994 and now houses 75 small businesses and artist studios. This site is just one of many in the US being flipped to meet the interests of a wave of new city dwellers. As cities have become more desirable, these industrial sites have been transformed into breweries, artist studios, offices for small businesses, or even restaurants. Historic buildings such as the Greenpoint Design and Manufacturing Center tell the tale of how valuable urban land gets repurposed to fit the needs and desires of the city's ever-changing population. This stop also highlights an ongoing opposition in Greenpoint's history, that between large manufacturing and smaller businesses.
The fourth stop of your tour is the Newtown Creek Nature Walk. The walk was built in 2007 by the New York State Department of Environmental Protection via the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs Percent for Art program, alongside the upgrade of the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant. The purpose of this quarter-mile creekside path is to breathe new life into the long and accessible industrial shoreline of Newtown Creek, thus acting as a nexus for the differing histories and identities of Greenpoint that continue to intermingle in the neighborhood's present. As you stroll through the pathway, there are several features along the Newtown Creek Nature Walk that illustrate this entanglement of experiences, which include the Vessel, the Seven Stone Circles, the Watershed Bollard, and Wild Creek Path. You will come across the Vessel almost immediately after passing the entry gate. You have now arrived at the Vessel. This 170-foot design feature that includes 2 bout walls gives visitors a visual to how boats were built along the shoreline of the East River side of Greenpoint, circa the 19th century. The boats that were built in Greenpoint were said to be twice the size of the replicated design in the Nature Walk. The lumber that was used to construct these boats were imported from Nova Scotia and processed in parts of the surrounding area where the wastewater treatment plant now stands. After leaving the Vessel, you will enter the turret, and from there, the next feature of interest will be crossed at the end of the long path. Look for a tree encircled by 7 stone circles. Well, did you get your steps in at least? Because you have now arrived at the 7 stone circles. These 7 granite stones are situated around a honey locust tree that have the names of native plants used by the early First Nations people of the Lenape etched into their faces at different angles. The artist, who helped design a majority of the features on this walk, chose to angle these names to reflect the place it identifies as you read them. After leaving 7 stone circles, if you feel the need to rest a bit before continuing on, take a seat at the steps leading to Newtown Creek. The next feature of interest is on the right side of the steps. You have arrived at the Watershed Bollard, a 4,000-pound granite slab shaped to represent a ship bollard, which is a call to the industrial shipping past of Greenpoint that used to secure ships which would come to port in Newtown Creek's waters. Etched into the face of the slab is the topography of Newtown Creek's original watershed prior to European contact. When light rainfall happens, the etching has a slight incline so that it mimics the behavior of water as it travels through the watershed. After leaving the Watershed Bollard, the last feature of interest as a part of this stop is behind the bollard, meaning it is the path that you will be walking onto as you make your way at the Newtown Creek Nature Walk. As you walk this section of the Newtown Creek Nature Walk, it has been robustly planted with native flora such as eastern red cedar, pitch pine, sawtooth oak, swamp white oak, and sweet gum. The contrast of native flora and aquatic fauna that exists on this path against the industrial setting of the creek provides a possible vision of the industrial identity of Greenpoint seamlessly coexisting with the natural identity of Greenpoint. Currently, the Nature Walk is in phase 1 of design. Phase 2 of the walk, which includes an overwater bridge area, is currently being built and slated to be open to the public in the spring of 2020.
Okay, so that's the end of that part. And then stop number 5, we have directions for walking through. And then the Newtown Creek Alliance at the Kingsland Wildfl Community Center.
The 5th stop of your tour is the Newtown Creek Alliance, located at Kingsland Wildfl Community Center. The organization came to be in 1997 as Greenpoint community members gathered to begin addressing the issues of Newtown Creek. One of the concerning issues of Newtown Creek has been TSOs, otherwise known as combined sewer overflows. It is one of many sources of pollution impacting Newtown Creek. Weather events that produce at least 1/10 of an inch of rainfall overwhelm the sewer system and send 1.2 billion gallons of untreated sewage and stormwater into the creek each year. Newtown Creek also contains one of the largest oil spills due to ExxonMobil in American history, where 30 million gallons of oil was spilled. In 2004, NCA, alongside Riverkeeper and Council Member David Yasiki's office via the New York State Attorney General, filed a lawsuit against ExxonMobil. Then, in 2010, the lawsuit reached a settlement where $19.5 million in community benefit money was awarded to use for assorted environmental programs through the Greenpoint Community Environmental Benefit Fund, which funded environmental education projects and green infrastructure. The New York City Audubon Society, in partnership with the NCA, a film production company known as Broadway Stages, and community-based organization Alive Structures, received a GCEF grant of almost $1 million, which was additionally matched to install a multi-level bird-friendly intensive green roof. This green roof would be able to reduce stormwater runoff, create a wildlife corridor for birds and insects, and serve as an outdoor education classroom that would provide environmental education programming for Greenpoint residents. The roof was planted with biologically diverse native plant species and is regularly monitored to assess the health of green roof's biodiversity. The project has also provided numerous educational experiences for teachers within the Greenpoint and greater northern Brooklyn area. Eco Festival Community Days during the warmer months established a volunteer network for maintenance and training for green-collar jobs, which focused on green roof installation and maintenance. The following were key factors in building community resilience and allowing people within the community to not only be involved, but in control and aware of projects near their home. The GCEF further funded the project and led to more programs in education and expansion of the green roof. The success of the green infrastructure prompted the $1.5 million New York State grant, which was given to Broadway Stages and Aleve Structures to fund additional green roofs in Greenpoint. While the Kingsland Wildfl Community Center has shown positives on an environmental and socioeconomic level, it appears as though there are not enough green infrastructures being funded quickly enough, and/or many are not in progress.
This is the sixth stop of your tour, Penny Bridge. Known as the Meeker Avenue Bridge, back in its heyday, the bridge served as the main link between Greenpoint Brooklyn and Mass Ave Sunnyside Queen. Funnily enough, but quite literally, the name of the bridge comes from the toll that was required to cross it being 1 penny until 1881. Later, in 1939, Penny Bridge was demolished to be replaced by the now well-known Kosciuszko Bridge that would be built a block away. Still, to this day, the bridge's abutments, or structural supports, are visible from both the Brooklyn and Queens sides. It was near this area, specifically between Apollo Street and Meeker Avenue, is where the Coast Guard first discovered the oil spill on the surface of the water, seeping from the shoreline as a result of the infamous Exxon spill. The site of the old bridge is now the closest point of entry to the oil spill, which has been recorded as one of the worst in American history. But also, it is the site of proactive remediation to restore the vitality of Newtown Creek, and restoration it needs, as the fossil fuel-rich history is heavily intertwined to the length of Newtown Creek. Its industrial narrative is punctuated by the rise of mom-and-pop fossil fuel along the creek's edge, and the presence of legacy toxins and other slumbering environmental baths. Aside from what seems like an insurmountable environmental tragedy such as the Exxon spill, a lot of good has resulted from the grassroots activism and collaboration between all levels of state and local governance in securing the needed attention to help the creek restore itself.
The seventh stop on your tour is Msgr McGolrick Park. McGolrick Park is where you would go in Greenpoint if you want a low-key and relaxed park experience. The historic park was created in the early 1890s, originally named Winthrop Park after Assemblyman Winthrop Jones. As the years went on, new features were added to the park, such as the playgrounds in 1897 and the curved shelter pavilion made of limestone in 1910, which is now recognized as a New York City landmark. The park features monuments that pay tribute to points in American history as well. Adjacent to the pavilion, built in 1923 by Carl Augustus Heber, the World War I Memorial pays tribute to 150 Greenpoint soldiers who fought in the war. On the opposite side of the pavilion stands the Monitor and the Merrimack Monument, which honors the Battle of the ironclad USS Monitor against Confederate Merrimack. In 1941, the park was renamed after Msgr McGolrick Park, who served as a pastor and a prevalent community leader for 50 years to the northern Brooklyn community. McGolrick is honored for his influence in building a new church, convent, rectory, hospital, public meeting forum, school, and a playing field. Though the park started with not much, today you'll find a vibrant green space with towering trees, a quiet scene that is both dog and kid friendly, along with a sprinkler system, picnic tables, and benches that make McGolrick Park a popular summer hangout spot.
Yeah, this was my point, but our audio is not doing its autoplay, but this is essentially the slide that we actually used Open Data for. And here we compare the previous slide, which talks about 5 Blue Slip, versus the auto, which is this stop right here. And this is another image of what it looks like. We talk a little bit about some of the amenities, and we talk about how it is listed as affordable housing, even though in reality, the income requirements are kind of unrealistic, especially when you compare them to 5 Blue Slip, which are actually much more impressive and effective. So for example, the difference between your income being 14 to 54 for 5 Blue Slip, which is the first, and then the auto, the income for housing, for affordable housing, quote unquote, is between 46 to $135,000. That's just single person income. And then we got a little bit into gentrification, and this is really where we pulled from open data most heavily. So I have this graph here showing the averages from 2003 to 2018. Again, this is all from the NYC Open Data portal. So here we proved that the median rental price increased 29% between these years. And then also we have the rental, and we also have the price to buy a home, which those are different markets, obviously, but they kind of represent different folks that might be looking to buy versus rent. So the price to buy a home increased 4 times. And you can see that one of the big reasons that happened is because this was constructed and then it was sold. And this point actually right here is likely due to either this exact building being created by the developer and then sold to the business management owner, or others that are just like it. So sorry about the no audio, but more or less that's what it says. And then this is stop number 9, and I see that the audio is there. The next stop is Dollar Up, an Eastern European grocery store located on Greenpoint's main economic thoroughfare of Manhattan Avenue. Dollar Up sells a number of imported goods not found at a normal American grocery store. Things like German cream cheese, a wide variety of pickled goods, and European candies. If you step inside, you'll see much of the packaging and signage is in Polish. This humble supermarket represents the Polish hold of the Greenpoint neighborhood and has been open since at least 2014. Nicknamed Little Poland, Greenpoint is home to the second largest Polish population in the US. As gentrification raises rents and pushes out the Polish population in Greenpoint, mom and pop establishments such as Dollar Up are being replaced with stores that match the neighborhood's new, trendy identity.
It is now the final stop on your tour of Greenpoint. This is the future Greenpoint Library and Environmental Education Center, which provides an insight on the future plans in regards to the green infrastructure of Greenpoint. Right now, what you see is the previous library that existed being rebuilt and modeled to follow the design created. The Greenpoint Library is set to be completed in 2022. The previous Brooklyn Public Library received a $5 million GCEF grant, which was additionally matched to be able to renovate it into a green building and create an environmental education center. This includes designing and constructing an intensive green roof and a community composting space and replacing concrete floors with native plant landscaping and permeable pavement. The project also includes installation of high-efficiency HVAC and lighting systems, and building management controls. Additionally, water-efficient plumbing systems and fixtures, rainwater harvesting and stormwater runoff control systems, and alternative energy systems such as solar arrays and wind turbines. As mentioned in the Kingsland and Wildfl Green Roof Stop, combined sewer overflow, CSOs, has an impact on Newtown Creek. Green infrastructures are thus used to help battle this environmental issue. The new and renovated Greenpoint Library will offer a system to capture rainwater before it overwhelms the sewer system. While the environmental benefits that are offered are great, there are educational benefits as well. The project will conduct workshops and presentations for Greenpoint schools, community groups, and residents, which include increasing the availability of digital remediation reports and creating environmental lesson plans and toolkits for students to be offered at the new library. This is all aimed at deepening community understanding of the Greenpoint environment.
Thank you guys so much. That was awesome. Don't worry about the technical difficulties. We're all having them. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. I wanted to, as we start our conversation for the next half an hour, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, give you a little bit more context about this particular assignment and other assignments that that students are working on, and why incorporating open data is so crucial, in my humble opinion, particularly in partnerships with community organizations. So yeah, that's great. That's great, Jimmie. So the Urban Sustainability Program at Brooklyn College is a really hands-on, locally focused program. I know that those are all very sexy buzzwords, but it's actually really true here. It's designed to help students to come up with kind of creative, applied solutions that foster environmental protection and social equity and economic vitality. So this project that Jimmie and Adam and Malak and Kiara was put together in their capstone course in that program. And so that's really designed to have students bring the skills that they've gained to a particular problem or place. And so for the last few years, we've been having students put together these PodWalks, which Professor Boger designed, who's another colleague of mine. And students work in teams to design sustainability themed tours of Brooklyn. And they're supposed to focus on environmental and social and economic kind of concerns. And then they put together a multimedia tour for the public that helps them really bring together what they've learned about what sustainability and resilience mean in super, super local contexts. So when I started teaching the course, I wanted students to integrate some kind of data analysis into their PodWalk for two really big reasons. The first is that a lot of our students really want city jobs, and having familiarity and exposure to open data is a really good skill for them. So there's like a very practical component here. But more than that, I really want students to think about the quality of the data relative to either what people are saying that they've talked to in their communities that they're working with, or their own experience if they happen to live in a particular neighborhood. And I think that that serves a couple of purposes. It deepens their understanding and their critical quantitative skills, which I think are like increasingly crucial in our society. And it also provides a really nice reliability check on open data and helps to identify some limitations wherever they exist. So I've always used really hyper local data in all of my classes because I think it just works better. Students learn more. And open data is obviously really incredible in that regard. So I've had students work on projects related to 311 calls and restaurant grades, trying to see if there's like discrimination in restaurant grading of particular kinds of foods, things like that. And in my experience, as I've been working with open data with students, students are learning more and they're grasping it on a deeper level, just in my own experience. So in my opinion, I think open data is really crucial to public quantitative literacy. And that can kind of get infused in these kinds of public tour projects that these students are coming up with too. I also think that community partners are really crucial here. So I was so grateful when Lisa agreed to work with the Greenpoint group on this project, because they're also really crucial in trying to figure out any possible limitations to any of the open data for particular purposes. So for example, I'm working on a project right now in South Brooklyn on sunny day flooding along Jamaica Bay, in those neighborhoods along Jamaica Bay. And there's a question about whether or not folks should rely on 311 reporting to identify sunny day flooding, because that's not really necessarily matching up with some other data that neighborhood groups are collecting or something like that. So I think these partnerships are really crucial to improving the data also. And I also just think that the open data has really opened up all of these new opportunities for researchers to work with more city agencies and community groups. And those partnerships are just, I'm witnessing them sort of flowering just in this link over very small pieces of the giant universe of open data. So that is my evangelist spiel. And that's where we're sort of coming from here. And I had some questions that I was hoping that maybe could open up into a larger conversation. So I'm going to ask actually a bunch of questions just to Jimmie and Adam and also Lisa. And I'm hoping that maybe you guys can just jump in wherever you want on whatever piece of that you want. Okay. And then please, for folks in the audience, please just throw whatever questions you have in the chat and we'll compile them and also start to address those a little bit, if that sounds good with everyone.
Yeah.
So Jimmie.
And maybe can you start with Lisa's, just because I know she does have to jump at once. So maybe start with hers.
Yeah. So Lisa, what did you and Newtown Creek Alliance get out of this sort of impromptu partnership with students from Brooklyn College working with open data? And how is that a benefit to you or to Newtown Creek or beyond?
So just this PodWalk itself, what is interesting to me personally and as to us as an organization, because we're really interested in this question of eco-gentrification and gentrification in general. And I think North Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and Greenpoint, those waterfronts are in many ways the poster child for rezoning, gentrification gone horribly wrong and really far beyond what the community has been able to handle. We've seen a lot of displacement. We're seeing that's not stopping. Development is rampant. And there's been a lot of negative impacts to our community. And so for us, in a project like this, it's really helpful to have an independent partner that's really interested in the nuanced layers of all of these things and the research aspect of it. So we have these sites that were included in this tour: the Penny Bridge, Kingsland Wildfl, the Newtown Creek Nature Walk, the GMDC building. And they kind of tell a story of the transformation of the waterfront as it still remains industrial, but these outside influences are putting increased pressure on it. And then we have the perspective of these students that are really looking to understand gentrification. And so it really articulates some of those outside forces. So you see the affordable housing that's being developed, which is sort of helpful in keeping displacement down. But not nearly helpful enough. And then you also see kind of like the changing of the streetscape with those bodegas and Polish-owned markets. I really loved that picture because you even saw not only were those signs in Polish, but they were also in Spanish. So that really kind of sends a message as to who's using those markets, who's employed by those markets. And that's also really very interesting to us because our mission isn't so much how the community is transforming, it's more of how that impacts the waterway and the industrial integrity of the waterway. And then those have some reverse impacts on those communities as well. So it helps kind of put our work in context, which is really, really critical because we don't always have the capacity to do something. My organization is very, very small. We have 2 full-time staff members. And we try and accomplish a lot of different things. We have a dozen projects going at any given time. And so having these kinds of partners is really, really important so that we can do the work that we're trying to do in these nuanced ways. And so we also understand things from these outside perspectives as well. That was a very long answer. Thanks.
No, that was great. Thank you. Jimmie and Adam, I have questions for you. What did you gain from this work? And how do you see the work fitting into your career goals? But also specifically, I'm interested in whether or not, what were the advantages, if there are any, for you guys, for me insisting that you work with open data? I'm sorry.
What did I gain from the project? I think what I liked about this project so much is that, and I really do like the assignment. I like that my first visit, we weren't instructed to do anything. Like at least how I viewed it, you just go and you just look around and you just use your experiential knowledge, which is like very soft and amorphous. It's just like what I think is important, what I think is a problem, but like it's my opinion essentially, right? And then by the end, you have like a really well presented argument with data that you've spent like hours researching and pulling. And I think that like the chart that I have is like maybe not even that impressive, but it was like a bunch of work to get there. So I liked the process of it. I liked changing from my really soft idea of like, I think that this thing matters and like my words, which are soft and like they don't impress people as much unless you're like super well spoken. And even then, like it just doesn't go as far. It just doesn't have the same hold to being able to say like use pictures in collaboration with something like that's more of a graphic or another percentage that like really concrete down what you have to say. How do I see the work fitting into my career goals? Definitely, again, talking about the process, I think this assignment, and I guess as it relates to open data, I would think I was the person in our group that was really like, whoa, this is so cool. Like, did you guys know that there's like this whole website where you can just look up everything and anything that you want to know about the city and just more about the process? I probably pulled like 9 data sets and I only presented from 1 because that was the one that was like necessary and like, relevant to our discussion to our final presentation. It was so fun and I thought really empowering to have all the little, like I remember looking at, you were talking about the letter grades and 311 reports for restaurants. And I remember like I had never even heard of these restaurants, but I could tell you what was happening in their kitchen. And that was just so cool to me. So in terms of like, that was really exciting for me and how I see it fitting into my career goals. I think this helped me to like respect how hard it can be to make a strong argument and like even just creating one simple graph like we did, it actually takes so much. And so much work was already done for me. So much had to be recorded with like some degree of accuracy to say like, okay, this is how much this costs. This is how much the rental was. This is how much people paid for that. So I'm super grateful that that already exists. And I think in terms of my career goals, data is interesting to me. And I feel like people get excited about data and it's like, it can be presented as like very cool or it can be like a buzzword, but this project was a kind of grounding for me and helped me to see how difficult it can actually be to produce even like a simple result. So it helped me to respect the process.
Yeah, in my experience, I feel like this project, especially the capstone, has really driven home the idea of connection to space, which I think is a very important detail when you're doing things that involves community resilience, environmental justice, especially in New York City, and just conservation in general. It's that connection to space, which this project really drives home, especially when you're building community resilience, because I feel like people just are kind of like on autopilot a lot. It's like, I just live here. I just go to work, come back, and that's it. But I feel like in the sense, like it kind of helps me, especially as being a resident of Williamsburg. I'm kind of like the sister neighborhood to Greenpoint. So even through the Urban Sustainability program, I didn't know that I lived a mile away from a Superfund site. And then to learn about Exxon, which is just another thing, it's like, wow, I'm so disconnected to my own neighborhood that I didn't know these horrible atrocities happen. So I feel like projects like this, and also like collaborating with community organizations and just having these partnerships, I wouldn't say public-private, but like public and community partnerships, kind of develop this way of like a resilience network. Like, hey, these are the issues that we understand from our perspective, and these are the issues that you are presenting to us. So how can we all meet or create like an action plan that kind of meets all these requirements for what we both feel like this neighborhood needs? Which I feel like the PodWalk kind of like create that fabric that everybody can pull from and create their own necessary action plans to address these issues. On top of that, how it relates to my career goals, well, I took the class with Professor Molina for quantitative studies, and I did the 311 grades for like, just like, and see if there was any like prejudice or like bias against certain restaurants and like cuisines. And I feel like from there, it started getting me more interested in data and like how we can use data to kind of like, just in a sense, tie a bigger picture. Because I feel like some people are more creative when it comes to like designing like images or graphics, but some people shine when their creativity is put to data, which is also important. And I feel like just having that interdisciplinary like focus where you have the artists and the artists with data kind of like come together and present these problems to like city, state, or even federal organizations that can really do some heavy lifting for us. But also how it relates to my career goals. I'm very interested in like urban natural areas and how they help public health, how they help biodiversity, especially in the urban ecology aspect. And this has taught me, this project has to respect and also understand collaboration, how important that is. Because, you know, as the saying old adage goes, it takes a village. So it's more in a sense like it taught me how to respect kind of the collaboration, how to appreciate the process, and trying to take a bunch of voices and perspectives and turn into one direct voice to create change.
Also, Adam, as you're talking, I think something that I took away from this, and I think like a downfall of mine is that I can be really idealistic, especially I mean, like I got a whole degree in sustainability, right? Like I obviously have hope for the future, and I obviously dream of like a perfect green world. But I feel like something that I like about our PodWalk and I liked about the experience of this is showing how like it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to come from one person, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to be this person pointing out that thing and you talking about this, and once someone else making that, like not even in our group dynamic, but more so like there are these 10 stops, and like you would like maybe someone else would put them together in a different way, or like you would point out something different. And like that's, I guess, when I was talking about too, like when I first went to Greenpoint, I've been there multiple times before, but like with this lens, I was like, it's just this whole neighborhood. Like, how am I supposed to know what to say? So I just had this huge list of like everything that I noticed. But then you realize like, okay, everything is related to sustainability in one way or another. It's going to be affected, whether it be the humans or the like literal concrete that might change, or the water, or like these things that I never ever knew about. And I'm also not a history buff, but I did the Greenpoint Manufacturing and Design Center point, which was like obviously a pretty historic site. And I also really enjoyed just learning about how like with that, like it's not perfect and it's not ideal, but things are always shifting and it's always a new vision. The only constant is change. And with sustainability, it's like, it's not just going to be, okay, we get to the point and then it's done. It's going to be, okay, we got to that point and then this thing comes up as an issue. So I think that the PodWalk does a decent job of respecting that.
I have to comment on something that you said, Adam, that resiliency network that is formed through this sort of work and this partnership and collaboration. So that is, I think, like you've hit the nail on the head here, because that is really so much of what we can do with this. So if we have the data and we have access to the data, we have people that know how to use the data, we have people that understand the data as an advocacy tool. And then if you can put all of these things together, then you can really push for that change that, yes, is always happening and will continue to happen, but you can maybe help steer and direct that change. So just a few things that like we're really interested in. That 311 data of flooded basement, that is really, really interesting and important if you're going to understand what's happening with sea level rise, with future threats to flooding, It shows kind of where those old, now buried waterways are. It kind of illustrates where groundwater tables are really, really high. That's the kind of information that we need to understand if we're planning for sea level rise and climate resiliency. And then another really great example of how we're using data locally, air quality is a real big issue for everyone in New York City, quite frankly, but in particular, North Brooklyn has suffered for a very long time from very poor air quality. We were talking about this in our planning call. I even learned the other day that there was a group called GASP, Greenpointers Against Smells and Pollution, that was around in the 80s. I didn't know about that one. I knew about a smelling committee that was, from the turn of the last century. I knew about Concerned Greenpointers Against Smells or something like that, but I hadn't heard of GASP before. But that's just to illustrate that air quality is such a bad issue. So a smelling committee, I know, it's really amazing. It's been bad for a very long time. But local advocacy groups, North Brooklyn Neighbors, our friends and partners in the South Side, El Puente, they've been doing these air monitoring deployment programs, citizen science or community-based science work for the last several years. And they're really showing that there are hotspots still in this neighborhood that need to be addressed. And we see that as in our COVID hospitalization and death rate, like those kinds of things align with where we're seeing bad air quality. So it's just another way we can use data to really understand our problems and try and develop solutions for it. And I want to just say one other thing, because it's something I'm super excited about for our organization and really works really well in this conversation. At the Kingsland Wildflowers Green Roof and Community Center, we're going to be installing soil moisture sensors actually next Friday. And so those moisture sensors paired with our weather station that's also on the green roof is going to help us better articulate the functioning of that green roof. So we're very concerned about combined sewer overflows and water quality in not only Newtown Creek, but around the city. And so we need to see a lot more green infrastructure being built. But there's a lot of questions around like, well, how do they work? How well do they work? Will they work on my building? And so us putting these sensors that are going to have that open, accessible data available to anybody that wants to use it, paired with that localized rainfall and temperature fluctuations, we're going to be able to answer some of those questions where there's nowhere else in New York City that you can have that information readily available. So that's kind of like we see the question and we're trying to answer it through data. And I'm hoping that Emily, Jimmie, Adam, folks like yourselves are going to be, part of our network and partnership to understand that data and to share that as an advocacy tool and all of the rest that comes along with it. So that's all just to say I really like that resiliency network comment because it really makes a big difference.
And for us, can I just jump in for a second? From my perspective, we just want to be doing the data work for whatever advocacy efforts in Brooklyn are sort of, aligned with our mission, which is, very broad. And so for us, because that's the best way to educate students and train students for good jobs. Not that that's the only point of a college education, obviously, but, I think it's that's generally our philosophy. So for us to have someone like Lisa saying, oh yes, please, the resiliency network, our point in that resiliency network is really important to us too. And we're trying to broaden that as well. And I know that all of these kinds of partnerships are popping up organically all over the city. And I think I think open data is partially at the foundation of some of that, honestly, because these things just happen organically. I'm looking at time. Are there questions for us? We can talk forever, but if there are any questions, please pop them in the chat.
Yeah, so I see Gabrielle has asked, and Lisa, why don't you start for this one, just in the interest of time. Where do you see Greenpoint in the next 10 to 20 years? I'm assuming she doesn't mean where is it going to move to physically.
And hopefully it's, not flooded yet. No, I don't think it will be in 10 to 20 years. But, I do think that Greenpoint has a lot of a lot to reckon with. There's going to be a lot more development. It's not stopping. And so we need to really figure out how we're going to move forward with that. We need new schools. That NuHart location is supposed to be, right at the doorstep of a new school. And we do not want to have a new school built on top of a Superfund site. And so that that we have a lot of questions, and very happily, a couple of the North Brooklyn nonprofits, El Puente, North Brooklyn Parks Alliance, North Brooklyn Neighbors, and Newtown Creek Alliance, we are finally forming a partnership after all of our years working alongside of each other in our silos. We're going to start working together, looking at open space planning, seeing if we can do another community planning process in response to the now almost 20-year-old rezoning. So I think that Greenpoint's going to continue to change, and there are a lot of questions as to where it's going to be in 20, 25 years. So don't go anywhere. Stick around. I don't know. If anybody else wants to try and answer that question, especially from kind of like the student perspective.
Yeah. I'll say that the biggest thing that one of the biggest things I'm worried about for Greenpoint's future is housing, not presence of, but affordability of. I already showed that, the option of buying a home became 4 times more expensive over the course of 15 years. That is insane. And New York City it's kind of like the poster child, because we have all these environmental bads and then they really flipped, and now it's like a very desirable place to live for many people, or at least like has social clout. So I really am just worried about that in so many ways, and that's why I'm a really big proponent of new, like, doesn't have to be new construction, it can be like kind of more retro commissioning, but things that are A, sustainable for housing, and B, that are mixed income. I don't think it has to be all affordable housing, nor do I think it needs to be all market rate. But in my opinion, those kind of mixed income options create sort of, again, talking about resiliency, you get a diversity of people who are exposed to one another and who create a network and who are actually like familiar with one another. And it creates like a more realistic, well-rounded neighborhood. So in terms of like my prescription to the neighborhood, that would be, my prescription is more mixed income housing, and also like as a second tier to that, to also use sustainable green building tools, things like HVAC, LEED, electrification, things of that nature. It's more big picture, but those are the things I would be excited to see.
As for me, because I want to answer Jenna's question I just saw, and also what Gabrielle, to kind of like marry the two questions. I've seen that the development has gone from the waterfront backwards and from the more like inland part to the waterfront, because it's more in a sense like I know that the waterfront development is a part of the CWP, which is the comprehensive waterfront plan, and it's very big development all across from Newtown Creek all the way to the East River facing sides. And I think for me, I would like to see more kind of like the community that's coming in with the development. What I like to see is that the community that's coming in with this new development kind of contribute to the neighborhood instead of just living here for, like as Jim said, social clout. Because that's what's more the problem with gentrification, is that people move here, they don't contribute nothing back to the neighborhood. It's more like, I live here, look at me living it up, and people who get pushed out are just kind of like thrown aside. And it's like, what do people do now? It's like, I used to live here, I'm being forced out by this new group of people due to development. So what can I do to kind of like reconcile with that, or stay in my neighborhood? So I think, again, it goes back to that access to data and access to like community resilience. That's like, hey, these people are moving in. It's not a bad problem that they're moving in, but the problem that's happening due to them moving in is that I'm being displaced. Mm-hmm. So it's more a question like equity. Like, how do we have everybody there and kind of like create a stronger community instead of like losing half the community and just having a new community that has like no cultural fabric? It's more sounds like a self-preservationist kind of cultural fabric.
Yeah. Also, one other thing that we should shout out is, I don't know where it stands in terms of reality, but I've heard, like, I see a number of renderings coming up online. I'm just going to pull it down to show that there is a plan, and there's like a formal website for it, Brooklyn Queens Connector. I see that this is like not that big, but there's a planned line that's going to run through Greenpoint. And I see this changing things notably, because right now I think one of the like weaknesses, if you may, or like the less attractive parts of the neighborhood is that it only really has good access to the G train. The L train is also there, which is obviously the L train has like changed dramatically in who uses it. But I think that this is really notable, and I think it's going to further gentrification. I mean, these are all neighborhoods that have been gentrified,
And they've
and
been,
they're all
like green gentrified. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but they've been like green gentrified, right? Like
yeah, exactly. They're all along the waterfront, which was all 100 years ago known as a place you wouldn't want to hang out because it's toxic, and now they're all places that you can go to enjoy and like spend money at. So I think that's a really big part of the conversation too, is the possible new transportation, which we don't talk about at all in our PodWalk because we can only fit so many things in, but that is huge.
I think that's a great place to end, though, actually, like the future of Greenpoint and transit being sort of central to that. I'm just looking at time, so we are officially done. And I just want to thank everyone so much for coming. I thought this was a great conversation. And Adam and Jimmie, you guys are awesome.